I want Jesus to walk with me in my trial. Lord, walk with me.
He's a very nosy horse. Hi ladies, how are you?
Hi, who is this?
This is Jesse. I can crank the light. Right, keep the flies out. Now, take care. Now, if at any time it looks like he's working, don't let him fool you. This is not that much work for him. He's about 2,500 pounds, of course. So he's over 1 ton. So he could probably pull 4,000 or 5,000 pounds on this carriage, no problem. I always tell the visitors, you could have had the extra fries last night. You could have had the biscuits with the gravy this morning. It wouldn't have slowed him down at all. He's very, very strong. Very. There you go. There you go, Jeff. And we're going to kind of wander on the edges of the property, and I'll point out some of the highlights as we go. And along the way, if you have any questions about anything, feel free. But Middleton Place, by about 1850, this was about 6,500 acres. That's where you going, buddy? So the whole place is about 2 miles wide, and it goes back almost 5 miles. So we're just going to kind of go around the edges here. We're going to stop by one of our middle-aged live oak trees. It's about 400 years old. And we're going to stop by Eliza's house. It's a freedman's cabin. Talk a little bit about slavery. So Charleston was a very, very wealthy city. So the house is meant to be in the middle. You've got the formal gardens to the north, the original stables for the horses to the south. This is what they call Greensworth, this big sweeping grassy area to the west of the house. And then once you get up to the house, about a mile long view out the Ashley River. And of course you have to have these great old, what's called a live oak tree. So a lot of folks are very interested in the Spanish moss we have here. It's not Spanish, it's not moss, it's actually a bromeliad. It's in the same family as pineapples, and it actually has a very small flower. It has a little green flower. Let me see if I can find it. And the flowers will produce a little seed pod. And so this, let's see, there's a tiny, tiny one here. So this was a flower, that little brown flower, and that will turn into a seed pod like this. And that's popped open. And the seeds are just a little tiny brown speck with a white kind of feathery, wispy thing, and they fly on the breeze and they settle in the branches. They don't take anything from the trees. They're what they're called an epiphyte, an air plant. It takes its moisture and its nutrients from the air, not from the tree. And these trees, these two are about 200 years old, and they're kind of reaching over and they rest on the ground because the trees to the north have grown much faster and they've kind of shaded them out. So these are reaching for the sunlight. And if you notice on the underside of some of these branches, there's a little bit of sheep's wool. Our sheep like to come and scratch their backs on the underside of the branches. And the horses, well, they get to come out here in the morning. Same family with pineapples. And they did use it to stuff mattresses to sleep on. We have a letter during the American Civil War from one of the Middletons. He's out on Fort Sumter with the Confederate troops, asking for 3 bales of it, 3 bundles of this to be sent out there to stuff the mattresses. Now, a lot of folks worry that it's full of bugs. which, if it's laying on the ground, it probably does, but in the trees, it's fine. It was often used by poorer people, the slaves, soldiers, to use it as a mattress stuffing. Not uncommon at all. They call it the Spanish beard, named after the conquistadors, the Spanish explorers. A lot of folks say it looks... There's even a story, well, it's kind of a myth. They talk about a Spanish conquistador who fell in love with an Indian maiden, and she told him to meet her at a particular tree. And he goes there and he waits and waits for her, and she never comes. And he's there so long that his beard begins to grow into the tree. It's completely made up, but I think it's sort of this idea of the Spanish moss comes from that as well. Although, like I say, it has nothing to do with Spain, but it is a bromeliad, same family as pineapples. Now, I do get some questions about the brick fence here. A lot of bricks made here. As a matter of fact, we did some archaeological surveys, and we found that area across the way where they were making bricks here. The enslaved people would make the bricks here. I do know over in Mount Pleasant, the other side of Charleston, they list an enslaved man there. He makes 5,000 to 6,000 bricks a day, which is definitely no easy job. But you can see the reflection pool. It's laid out north-south. The greens that we're traveling on here laid out east-west. And they form a 90-degree angle. And the formal gardens off to my left are all working off of that. And what's amazing, when the gardens were begun in the 1740s and 50s, if there were flowers out there, they're incidental. It's not about flowers originally. It's more about geometric patterns and shapes, patterned after the gardens at Versailles, France. Over the years, lots of color added, lots of flowers. Today I can see hydrangea in bloom and magnolias. Over the years, they've added about 10,000 camellias, and those will bloom all winter, again with this subtropical climate. And then, of course, azaleas added in the 19th and 20th century. Today, they estimate over 100,000 azaleas in our gardens. So we're going to head over to the shade under this big live oak tree. And I've got a picture of what this all looked like before the American Civil War. Nice breeze. Ooh, that's nice. So they tell us this tree, about 400 years old. But you can see how they hollow. But you can see how they hollow. See in the end of the limb here how it gets kind of rotted out. So they can't take a sample and count the rings. Instead, they take a measurement and they use a mathematical formula to figure out how old they are. This one about 400 years old. The Middleton oak out in our gardens, that one they estimate about 900 years old. And every now and again, they do have to cut these trees down, although it's against the law to cut down these really big ones without all kinds of permission. And now and again when they do, the highway department, very often when they're building roads, they have to cut them down. They'll use them actually to build wooden ships from them. So the other tree I always like to point out is the one up by the house there, to the right of that black wooden gate, because I think it might be the same tree in this picture. So what you see there There's that tree. So that building is what is there today, or at least what remains today. That building is the ruins up at the top of the circle. That pile of brick that's there. That was the original house built about 1705. And in 1755, they had these flanker buildings. This building and the other one built. This one originally was the library. This, which is our house museum today, originally was for guests and travelers. And then this little building would have been just ahead of where our restaurant is today. Probably a cabin for enslaved people to live in. This is your stable for the horses. Would have been just off here to my left. And then there's some buildings back here, maybe a dairy or a smokehouse. That's about where the front wall stable yard is today. This building looks very old, but it was built in the 1930s using this old brick, this sort of recycled brick, so it kind of fools the eye. They were trying to make it look older than it really is. But I always tell people when they see this, don't think of Gone with the Wind, you know, think of Mount Vernon, like where George Washington lived. It's more that kind of a style. And you don't see the row of slave cabins, all the enslaved people who would have worked here, because most of the work, and frankly most of the enslaved people, were across the river road. This whole place goes back almost 5 miles. Back there is where there's hundreds of acres of rice. They're growing all kinds of sweet potatoes and corn, all to sell down in the city. So here, about 2 miles away, just to the south, there's a settlement where some of the enslaved people lived. It was called Jerry Hill. Then you come to Cypress Swamp rice fields. So what that means is back in the 1740s and 50s, before the American Revolution, crews of slaves here cutting down trees hundreds, maybe thousands of years old, leveling out a cypress swamp, building dams, ditches, and reservoirs. Now they do say the alligators have to be bigger than 6 feet, more than 2 meters to take somebody. Although I have seen alligators almost as long as this carriage, feet long. About, what is that, about 4 meters. Yeah. So there are 38 kinds of snakes in South Carolina. There are some probably down by our chapel. So they are native here. They come and go as they please. But very often on a sunny day, they'll lay out in the sun to warm up. How you all doing? Good, thank you. So we call this Eliza's house. It was lived in after the American Civil War. So the people who lived here we call freedmen. They weren't slaves. But that being said, many slave cabins looked like this. And this originally was up about where the restaurant is today. About where that building was. So this would be a 2-family house. There's a chimney and then rooms either side for people to live in. And because of rice was the main crop they grew here. Some historians believe they needed 10 times the number of slaves on a rice plantation, cotton or tobacco. And with cotton and tobacco, those are big broadleaf plants. They take a lot of nutrients out of the soil. Here with the rice, they would grow it in an African fashion. So they would flood from time to time, and every time they flooded, they brought in more mud and silt and sort of kept the goats. Ooh. So these two, these are cashmere goats. Their names are Bert and Ernie. They're half brothers. And they get this fluffy winter coat, and you don't shear them like the sheep. You comb out that winter hair like a cat or a dog. They would shed that hair, and so they did have some cashmeres here, and they also had water buffalo here. They had water buffalo, came from Turkey, and so today down along the wood line, that little roof you see there, we do have a pair of water buffalo calves here. So the water buffalo, they have a waterproof hoof. They can be in the water and it doesn't harm their hooves. So we think what the Middletons were trying to do was to create a hybrid, to cross the water buffalo with some of the other cattle they had here, to get an animal that could work in the rice field. Well, it's a good idea, but it doesn't work. So during the American Civil War, the troops that come here and they burn the house, they also ate some of our water buffalo, and 3 of them are stolen. And believe it or not, truth is stranger than fiction. They ended up in Central Park in New York City, part of what is called the menagerie, the forerunner of the Central Park Zoo. Williams finds out, he writes a letter to a cousin up in New York, trying to get some kind of compensation. He needed the money, frankly. Never does, but that's how we know what we do. So today in our stable yards, we do have some different craft shops. So our blacksmith shop here, and just inside the gate to the left, the potter's shop. But I tell people this isn't the frontier. It's not like they had to make everything. The blacksmith, for instance, we know there's an enslaved man here named Quaco. That's an African day name. It means a man born on Wednesday. He was the blacksmith here, but he didn't have to make everything. They're shipping in things like tools and equipment. So his job more about repair and maintenance, sharpening things. Just inside the gate to the left, the potter's shop. And again, there's not someone here making teapots and dinner plates, but if you look in later, you'll find that there are these shards, these broken pieces of pottery that look kind of like bricks. They're this brick red color, and that's pottery that today archaeologists call colonaware, pottery made and used by the enslaved. We find a lot of that out here. The cooper's shop is in the center. A cooper makes barrels, pretty important for rice production. Down the end, the textile shop. Now, if you look in there, you'll see a loom and a spinning wheel for making cloth, but I've never seen lists of enslaved people that say weaver or spinner. I have seen a lot that say seamstress, meaning they're not making the cloth, they're just issuing cloth to people to make coats and trousers out of. But you can wander through later. The stable yard's all open till 5 o'clock. The gardens, they're open till dark. You can wander as long as you'd like out here. We put them away for the night because we do have foxes and bobcat out here, but they just run about. So sometimes the people in the barn will give them grain, will give them food, and so they're always hoping for food. They come here looking for it. That's what they think they're getting food. Always looking for something to eat. Let me bring you up to the house. There you go, Jess.
As much as I can. Good afternoon, everyone. You haven't had lunch?
And he gave it to his son, Arthur Middleton. And Arthur Middleton, he spent a lot of time in England. He was educated there. He studied law at Middle Temple in London. But he was also a signer of the Declaration of Independence. But he didn't get to enjoy liberty very long. One of the big problems here, of course, is for many, many years there was malaria, also yellow fever. Arthur Middleton died before he was 45 years old from the combination of malaria and probably pneumonia. His son inherits all of this, and actually he's rather famous for being the ambassador to Russia for 10 years, 1820 to 1830. He took his family with him. Sons were educated in the capitals of Europe. His daughters were very musical, and they were a hit at the court in St. Petersburg. So I'm just going to pause here for a moment. So this building, correct. That, so for instance, that stairway, that would have been it right there. And there was not a tree in their dining room. That was a question I had one time. That grew there after the buildings were burned. There you go. There you go. A little bit, yeah. So you can see, of course, we were just there. That building, I'll put it right there. So that building is this pile of rubble right there. So all these buildings stood until February the 23rd, 1865. You know, one of the ways I explain the Civil War here as abolition, the abolition of slavery, grows in the North, secession, the desire for South Carolina to break away from the Union grows here in the South. Abraham Lincoln was elected 1860. He only received about 40% of the popular vote. He wasn't elected with a majority. But he did say when he's elected, he said that he would preserve the Union, preserve the United States, if he had to free none of the slaves, all of the slaves, or just some. Well, here, they weren't waiting to find out. They signed what's called the Ordinance of Secession to break away from the Union, December of 1860. Williams Middleton was a signer. His brother, John Izard Middleton, up in Georgetown, a signer. And it's very interesting, a man named James Chestnut, he'd been a U.S. Senator, United States Senator from Charleston. At that time, he makes a remark that a lot of folks north and south agreed with. He said, I will gladly drink all the blood spilled over this, because it will not even fill.
While I'm on my tedious journey,
travel safe.
I want Jesus
All right, Jeff.
to walk with
There you go,
me.
There you go.
In my trial, Lord, walk with me. In my trial, Lord, walk with me. While I'm on my tedious journey, I want Jesus to walk with me. In my sorrow, Lord, walk with me. In my sorrow, Lord, walk with me. While I'm on my tedious journey, I want Jesus to walk with me. Oh, walk with me.